The first time I noticed a white pickup truck, I didn't think anything of it. It was a Tuesday morning in early March. I had just started a new job at a physical therapy clinic in Raleigh, and I was still figuring out my commute. The truck was parked along the curb outside my apartment building on Darlington Street. When I left for work at 7:40 a.m., that same white truck was there when I got home at 5:15. I remember thinking the neighbor must have bought a new vehicle. I'm 24. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment on the second floor. My name is Delaney. I moved to Raleigh 8 months ago for the job, and I barely knew anyone in the city. My closest friend was my co-worker, Priya, and even we were still in the getting-to-know-you phase. My routine was simple. Work, gym 3 days a week, grocery run on Sundays, occasional happy hour with Priya on Fridays. I walked the same path to the parking garage every morning. I stopped at the same coffee cart outside the clinic 2 or 3 times a week. The guy who ran the cart was named Marcus. He was maybe 30, always wore a black fleece, always had a joke ready. I liked him the way you like the person who makes your mornings slightly easier. The first time anything felt off was a Thursday in late March. I ordered my usual oat milk latte, 1 sugar, and Marcus handed it to me and said, "See you at Aldi this weekend." I laughed and said, "What?" "Sunday. You usually go around 11, right? I've seen you in there a couple times." I smiled and said something like, "Small world," and walked into the clinic. But I thought about it for the rest of the morning. The Aldi I shopped at was 2 miles from the clinic, in a completely different direction from where the cart was parked. He hadn't mentioned going there himself. He'd mentioned seeing me there. I told myself it was nothing. He probably lived near the store. It made sense. The following Sunday, I went to Aldi at 9 a.m. instead of 11. I didn't plan it that way. I just woke up early and decided to go. On Monday morning, Marcus handed me my coffee and said, "You went early this week." I stood there for a second trying to figure out how to respond to that. "Didn't see you at your usual time," he added. I said I'd been busy and went inside. That afternoon, I typed out a message to Priya explaining what happened. She read it and said it was probably just a coincidence, that Aldi gets crowded and maybe he shops there too. She said I had a habit of reading too much into things. She wasn't wrong about that. I do, but something about the phrasing bothered me. "You went early this week." That wasn't a guess. That was an observation. I started paying more attention. By the second week of April, I had noticed 3 things. 1, the white pickup truck had been parked on Darlington Street on 7 out of the last 10 mornings I'd left for work. 2, twice in the past 2 weeks, I had seen it parked near the clinic's parking garage. Not in it. On the street outside, engine off. 3, Marcus had made 2 more comments about my schedule that he shouldn't have known. Once he mentioned I had been at the gym late the previous night. Another time he asked how the new yoga class was going, a class I had signed up for but hadn't mentioned to anyone at work. I could explain each of those individually. Maybe he passed my gym. Maybe I'd mentioned yoga offhandedly and forgotten, but together they formed a pattern I couldn't shake. I Googled the coffee cart. It was licensed to a man named Marcus Teller. I searched the name on social media. I found an Instagram account with the same name. It was set to private, but the profile photo was him. Under the photo was a bio that read, "Patient." Just that word. Nothing else. I took a screenshot and sat on it for 2 days, telling myself I was overreacting. Then on Wednesday morning, I walked to the parking garage via a different route, a longer one, through the backside of the building. When I got to my car, there was a folded piece of paper tucked under the windshield wiper. It said, "You look nice and green." I was wearing a green cardigan. I went directly to Priya's office. This time, she didn't say I was overreacting. We looked at the paper together. She asked if I had ever given him my last name or told him where I worked in the garage specifically. I hadn't. The garage had 3 levels. He would have had to walk through it looking for my car, which meant he either knew what I drove or had searched every level until he found one that matched. I called the clinic's front desk manager and explained what was happening. She took it seriously. She walked me to my car for the rest of that week and helped me document everything. The dates of each comment, the truck sightings, the note. I filed a report with the Raleigh Police Department that Friday. The officer I spoke with was professional. He said what Marcus had done could qualify as harassment, depending on whether it continued. 2 days later, the coffee cart was gone. Not closed. Gone. The spot on the sidewalk where it had been parked for months was empty. No sign. No notice. I felt a mix of relief and something I couldn't name. Something worse than fear. Because relief would mean it was over, and I had no reason to think it was. The white pickup truck was parked on Darlington Street. When I got home that night, I called the police and gave them the plate number. They ran it and came back with a name. It was not Marcus Teller. It was registered to a woman named Carol Teller, an address in Garner, about 15 minutes south. The officer told me that didn't mean Marcus wasn't using the vehicle. He said to keep documenting. That was 6 weeks ago. The truck hasn't been back. Marcus hasn't been back. The coffee cart reappeared last week with a different person running it, a woman named Diane, who I now give my business to every single morning. I still check my windshield before I unlock my car. Last Tuesday, I found a grocery receipt on the ground near my tire. It was from an Aldi 2 towns over, time stamped 11:04 a.m. on Sunday. It was probably garbage. It was almost certainly garbage. I picked it up and put it in my purse anyway. I moved into the Carver Arms building on a Friday in September. It was a mid-range apartment complex in Denver, the kind with a gym nobody uses, and a leasing office that smells like carpet cleaner. I was 27, newly transferred for work, and I knew nobody in the city. My apartment was on the 4th floor, unit 408, corner unit, 2 windows facing the street. The building had a mix of long-term tenants and short-timers like me. My neighbor directly across the hall, in 407, was a man I'll call Craig. I knew his name because it was on a dry erase board mounted next to his door, one of those ones people use to leave notes for delivery drivers. He was probably 40, average build, quiet. We exchanged nods in the hallway twice, and that was the extent of it. The first strange thing happened about 3 weeks in. I came home from work on a Wednesday evening and found a takeout menu slipped under my door. Chinese place, 2 blocks away. I assumed the restaurant was doing a neighborhood drop. They leave them everywhere. I set it on the counter and forgot about it. The next week, another menu. Different restaurant, same format, slipped under the door. On the 3rd week, it wasn't a menu. It was a handwritten note on a plain index card. It said, "The pad thai from Lucky Garden is better than the pad CEW. Just a tip. No name. No apartment number." I stood in my doorway holding that card for a long time. Lucky Garden was the restaurant from the first menu. There was no way to know I'd looked at that menu unless someone had watched me come and go or had known I received it. Because I had never ordered from there, never mentioned it to anyone, never been seen at the restaurant. I knocked on the doors of 406 and 410 and asked if they'd also gotten menus. 406 hadn't received anything. 410 was never home. I told the building manager. He was a disinterested man named Terry who I strongly suspect did as little work as the lease legally required. He said people slipped things under doors all the time and there wasn't much he could do. I started paying attention to my hallway. For the next 2 weeks, nothing happened. No notes, no menus. I started to relax. Then in late October, I came home late from a work dinner, around 10:30, and as I stepped off the elevator, I noticed Craig's dry erase board had a message on it. It said, "Nice dress for '08." I was wearing a dress. I had been wearing it all day. I took a photo of the board and went straight inside and locked my door. The next morning, the message was gone. The board was blank. I went back to the building manager. This time I showed him the photo. He stared at it for a while, then said Craig had lived in the building for 6 years without any issues, and that I may have misread the note, or it could have been meant for someone else. I told him there was nobody else on the floor named 408. He said he'd look into it. He did not look into it. Over the next 3 weeks, the notes escalated, but only barely, which somehow made it worse. A card under my door, saying he'd noticed I liked running, and recommended a trail near Sloan Lake. A dry erase message that said, "Early shift tomorrow?" The night before I had a 7 a.m. meeting. Nothing overtly threatening. Nothing I could bring to the police and call a clear crime. But he was tracking me. The The running comment meant he had seen me leave the building in running clothes, either from his door or from somewhere outside. The question about my shift meant he was aware of my schedule. I started varying my routine, different departure times, different routes to the elevator. I stopped using the building gym after 6 p.m. and started going to a gym 2 blocks away instead. 2 days after I switched gyms, a note appeared under my door. It said, "New gym? Let me know if you need a recommendation." I called the Denver Police non-emergency line and filed a report. The officer I spoke with said it was a gray area. The notes were unsettling but didn't contain explicit threats. She told me to keep documenting and to contact him immediately if anything escalated. I called my sister that night for the first time in weeks and told her everything. She asked why I hadn't called sooner. I didn't have a good answer. The following Saturday, I ran into Craig in the elevator. Just the two of us. He smiled and said, "You're always up so early." That was it. We rode to the lobby in silence. I went directly to the leasing office and told them I needed to break my lease on safety grounds. After 2 weeks of back and forth, they agreed to let me transfer to a unit on the second floor of a different building in their network across town. I moved out on a Thursday morning. I didn't tell anyone in the building, and I packed my car in 2 trips as fast as I could. When I pulled out of the parking garage, I glanced up at the 4th floor. Craig was standing at his window. He raised one hand in a slow wave. I have been in the new building for 2 months now. Nothing unusual has happened, but last week I got a piece of mail addressed to me at the Carver Arms, forwarded to my new address. It was a blank card, no return address, no message inside, just a dried sprig of lavender tucked into fold. I started noticing him in November. I'm a registered nurse at a regional hospital in Tucson. I work 3 12-hour night shifts a week, usually Tuesday through Thursday, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. My name is Renata. I'm 31, and I'd been at that hospital for 4 years without a single incident I couldn't explain clinically. There's a parking structure attached to the hospital. 6 levels, about 800 spaces. Night shift staff park on levels 3 and 4. The walk from elevator to my car takes about 90 seconds on a normal night. The first time I saw him was a Wednesday morning in November, just after 7 a.m. I was walking to my car, and I noticed a man sitting in a gray Camry on level 3. Engine off, no visible reason to be there at that hour. I glanced at him as I walked past. He was looking directly at me. I got in my car, drove home, slept. When I came in that night, I didn't think about it. The second time was a week later. Same gray Camry, same level, different spot. He was sitting in the driver's seat again, and again he watched me walk past. I couldn't make out much beyond that he was white, probably in his 40s, wearing a dark jacket. I mentioned it to my charge nurse, a woman named Val, who had worked that floor for 12 years. She told me to report it to hospital security if I saw him again. I saw him again the following Tuesday. This time, I went directly to the security desk after my shift and described the car and the man. The officer on duty, a young guy named Hernandez, took my information and said he'd pass it along to the day shift. He said the structure was technically open to the public and they couldn't prevent someone from sitting in a car, but he'd flag it. 3 days passed without incident. Then on a Friday morning, just before I reached my car, I noticed a folded piece of paper tucked under the driver's side wiper. It said, "You work too hard. You should take better care of yourself. A friend." I didn't touch it. I photographed it and then picked it up with a glove from my scrub's pocket and put it in an evidence bag. Force of habit from clinical work. I walked back down to security and handed it to Hernandez. He looked at it for a long moment and said he was going to bring in his supervisor. His supervisor, a woman named Garza, took it more seriously. She pulled the parking structure camera footage from that morning and the 2 previous mornings I described. The gray Camry showed up on 11 different days going back to mid-October. I hadn't noticed it that far back, but it had been there. The vehicle was registered to a man named Thomas Varda with a Tucson address. No criminal history. Garza said she'd contact the police and work with them on it. They reached out to Varda. He denied leaving the note. He denied being in the structure. The car was in his name, but he claimed he shared it with a family member. The police couldn't verify who had been driving on those specific dates. That was the first dead end. I started taking alternate exit routes after my shift, using the stairwell on the far side of the structure instead of the elevator. I also started texting Val every morning when I got to my car, and she'd respond when she confirmed I'd left the floor. If she didn't hear from me within 10 minutes of my shift ending, she'd call security. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Then one morning I came out of the stairwell and stopped. The gray Camry was parked directly next to my car. I mean directly. Passenger side touching mine, which was technically impossible. There was a concrete pillar in that space the day before. He had moved. I backed up into the stairwell and called Val from there. She called security, and Hernandez was there in under 3 minutes. When we came out together, the Camry was gone. My car had a fresh scratch along the driver's door. I filed a police report that morning. The officer I spoke with, a detective named Solano, took it seriously. She said the behavior, following a pattern, leaving a note, then making physical contact with my property, represented an escalating pattern consistent with stalking. She said they would prioritize Varda and the family member he'd mentioned. They found the family member 2 days later. It was his adult son, mid-20s, living at the same address. The son had no criminal record. He said he used the car occasionally for errands. He couldn't account for his whereabouts on the mornings in question. There wasn't enough for an arrest. Detective Solano told me she would keep the case open and that I should continue documenting everything. She said if any contact escalated, to call 911 immediately. I changed my shift to Monday through Wednesday, so my schedule was different. I got a parking spot in an interior staff-only lot that required a key card to enter. I filed for a restraining order, which was denied on the grounds of insufficient evidence of a specific threat. That was 2 months ago. I haven't seen the gray Camry since. But last week, I was leaving the hospital at 7:15 in the morning, walking to the main lobby toward the staff lot, and a man at the information desk, a volunteer, older guy in a red vest, looked up at me as I passed and said, "You're the night nurse, aren't you?" "Third floor." I stopped and asked him how he knew that. He smiled and pointed at my badge. I looked down. My badge showed my name, my floor, and my photo. I had been wearing it every shift for 4 years without thinking twice about it. I thanked him and kept walking. Outside in the cold morning air, I unclipped the badge from my scrub top and held it in my hand. I haven't figured out what to do about that yet.